Welcome everyone to another edition of Adam Interviews. We are going to go back to a festival that I talked about a couple of weeks ago because I am so excited about it. It's called SoundTrax. It is a film music festival and it's going to be right here in Rochester. It's the first one of its kind in North America. I'm telling you, after this is over, everyone's going to go, how is this here in Rochester? I mean, the Jazz Fest is huge. This is right there with it. And that's partly because we are getting such incredible talent to come in and offer their wisdom, their stories in their industry, which is developing music for animation, for film, TV, video games. And we're going to talk with Seth Wright, who's worked on some of the most notable video games of our time in just a bit. But first, I want to introduce to you Bambi Moe. She has been spearheading music for a little company you might have heard of called Disney. 22 years. Bambi, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
It's so interesting because when we think of music and entertainment, I think Disney does come to mind primarily through Fantasia and Lion King. But the fact is, I've got to imagine almost everything Disney touches and produces, there's music behind it.
Well, yes. And I actually found something that I wanted to share with you. It's liner notes that Steven Spielberg, Steven Spielberg.
I've heard of him, I think.
Yeah. Wrote for a Disney music album. Okay.
Yeah.
And he wrote, these are Steven Spielberg's words. I can't think of a single animated feature that doesn't immediately associate itself with the song, nor can I think of a Disney song that doesn't inspire instant recognition of the Disney film from which it originated.
It's true.
So,
I mean, he hit it right on the head.
Hit it on the head. That was 1986.
Oh my gosh. And that remains true today.
It does. In fact, he goes on and if it's okay, I wanted to share.
We've got time.
Okay, good. He said, beyond the technical problems of integrating music and film that Walt and his staff wrestled with and solved, I believe his greatest achievement was elevating music beyond its earlier role of mere accompaniment to the screen action. The perfection of the synchronization of music and movement, particularly in the cartoons of the 30s, serves as a symbol of the era of American craftsmanship.
Music and movement. That I hadn't really thought about, but that is so true. It's choreographed almost.
It is. And, when you go back in time and you think about men like Carl Stalling, greatest animation composer of all time, in my opinion. It's you really think about it in terms of music and movement and synchronization when you go back to those early silly symphonies. The impact of song in music is it's tremendous, and it's as old as time. So I feel very fortunate being a part of that musical legacy. And I know Mark Waters, who is my dearest friend and colleague and one of the great animation composers himself, and one of the professors at Eastman. I think we're both pretty thrilled to be a part of this legacy.
And I should note at this time that Mark and Bambi are going to be part of an incredible panel on Thursday. The time is going to be 1:30 in the afternoon. It's called Composer Conversations. Excuse me. Let me get this right. It's at 3:30, my apologies, The Art and Craft of Music for Animation, featuring Mark Waters and Bambi Moe. And they're going to be, this is open to you if you wanted to take part in this incredible discussion and the nostalgia. And Steven Spielberg kind of touched upon this, but the nostalgia attached to it, it's like smelling that gum that your dad used to chew. I mean, that's the type of emotional link that people have with this kind of music.
Well, it's true. And, I think that, honestly, I think composers who write in animation are really unsung heroes. I think that, the respect that I have for those composers, I think it's harder to write for animation than it is for any other medium, to be honest. What a good animation composer has to do is there are just so many levels to their talent, which has to do with not just hitting the action and the bings and the bongs and the movement in that way, but it's got to have memorable melodies and themes. It's a very dense form of music in a way, because a half-hour animated series, it's wall-to-wall music. Usually it's at least 21 minutes of music that has to be delivered. And these guys back in the day were writing, they start on a Monday and they deliver a finished score by Friday. So just to be able to talk about that, share the experience. Mark and I have 10 solid years together of working on a number of Disney television series, films, and we're really excited to be able to, I think we both come from a belief that it's really important to pay it forward and to share experience. And for me personally, I feel like I'm a storyteller, and I have so many great stories to tell. And if you don't get them out there, if you don't share them, you really don't have any idea about, well, how did that get done? Or how did that, come together? Or, so I'm really excited to be coming to Eastman for this. This is the very first North American Film Festival. I find that in and of itself remarkable. Not just that it's in Rochester, which is understandable because Eastman is such an incredible, has such an incredible reputation, but the first in North America, that's a big deal.
How is that possible? Because it's we have John Williams. This is not some niche craft here.
No, exactly. And, and again, I'm delighted that they're recognizing, and a lot of it has to do with Mark and his amazing career. But the fact that animation music is being discussed and shedding some light, and hopefully we'll have some fun. We'll tell some really great stories.
All right,
and
I don't want to steal your thunder, but what is one of the stories that you do plan on telling?
Let's see. What can I give? What can I share? Well, Mark and I had a really remarkable experience when we went to the UK, and we worked in, a lot of people don't know, but the studios in the UK, a lot of them are old converted churches, and the sounds that come out of those churches, it's amazing. Well, one particular place that we got to work at was a studio called Air Lyndhurst. And that studio was owned by none other than the fifth Beatle, George Martin. And so we'll be talking about a story that we had when we went to the UK to record music for the Aladdin series. And we'll talk about our encounters with Mr. George Martin himself, which were pretty thrilling.
What a legend. What a legend. I can't wait to hear that story. Hopefully I can be there for that. How did you start in all this? It's one thing to be a kid and say, I'm going to work for Disney, and then to end up working for Disney. How did that happen?
Well, it really wasn't about working for Disney. I was a kid on Long Island who used to read album jackets and liner notes like they were library books. That was my passion. Some kids love comic books. I loved just reading and having the knowledge of who wrote what, who sang what, starting to recognize. And I had no idea that there was a job in the world where that information or that knowledge would be valuable. Obviously, and the first thing I'm asked is Bambi really your name? Is it your given name? And
I wasn't going to ask. No,
it's okay. I've answered it so many times. Yes, Bambi is my given name. So I can promise you it was not a goal in my life to work for the Disney company.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was teased. I was picked as a kid. But here's the thing, destiny is an interesting thing, and I feel like there was a bit of destiny there for sure. I answered an ad in a Hollywood trade publication, music publishing, copyright assistant, the Disney company. That was back in 1981. I wound up getting that job. I worked in that job for about 6 months, and I saw where the real action was. And that was in the product development department at Disneyland Vista Records. That's where they actually made recordings, story records. Those story records where you follow along and the beep and you turn the page.
Yeah, I remember those.
Well, I produced quite a few of them. And also, at the time when I joined the company, they just had this phenomenal success with a little album called Mickey Mouse Disco. And they wanted to continue that success. They wanted to continue, you know, it was a very creatively fertile time. And I was a part of a really incredible team. And we came up with ideas. Now, bear in mind, we're a little record label. Yes, granted, we're the world's largest children's record label, but we're a small record label nonetheless. And we were coming up with ideas, and we were having success with our song albums. And this is what made it really quite remarkable. For example, worked on an album called Mousercise. I don't know if any of your viewers listen.
I remember that.
Okay, well,
I'm a child of the 80s.
Okay, fair enough. Then maybe you did Mousercise. I know I did. But that was a follow-up album to the success of Mickey Mouse Disco. And the reason I bring it up is that Mousercise became a very successful Disney Channel television series. Then the next album up that we did was something called Totally Mini. And Totally Mini became a television special featuring Elton John. So if you can imagine, this is back in the early 80s. So the fact that this little record company was coming up with these ideas that were becoming much bigger and becoming other kinds of entertainment, it was really exciting. So when the man that ran the record company became the head of television animation, he knew my background in song creations, song for the song albums, and I had by that point produced quite a few story records. So he asked me to join the staff of television animation to grow this was now right around 1990. Little Mermaid had just come out. Disney was going through its own animation renaissance. Brilliant Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, literally transformed the Disney animated feature musical, brought it all back, and with the Little Mermaid, and it was exploding. So my boss was put in charge of television animation. We created the Little Mermaid television series, and we had to have a song, of course, in every episode. So he wanted someone that he knew who knew how to craft and find songwriters and produce songs for the projects. That's what I met Mark Waters right around that time. He was among composers who were working on, of all things, the Steven Spielberg's The Tiny Toons.
Oh, yes.
Right? But Mark had done something, which I found this out much later. When he sent in his demo cassette of his music from Tiny Toons, he included other tracks on it from something else. And they showed the range of his sound, his style, his capability. He's a gifted orchestrator and arranger, besides being a great composer. So for me, his little cassette tape stood out. And a lot of the projects that I was working on, besides The Little Mermaid, was another series called Goof Troop. And I have to say that Mark and I, my awareness, my knowledge, my whole, I guess, training, on-the-job training, was side by side with Mark. I learned what a composer does and how valuable they are. And we kind of grew up together at Disney during this time, because Mark did a number of series and was nominated and won several Emmys for his music.
And Bambi and Mark are going to be side by side once again on Thursday at 3:30. Their discussion is called The Art and Craft of Music for Animation. It's one of 3 different talks and events happening Thursday as part of SoundTrax. And the other one is happening on Thursday again at 10 a.m. and it's music for video games. Seth Wright is going to be my guest next. Bambi Moe, by the way, talking about these lines, these connections, part of her book called Part of the Magic, a collection of Disney-inspired brushes with greatness. Highly recommend, especially given what we've just heard right now. Bambi Moe, I can't thank you enough for your time, inspiration, and writing the soundtrack of our lives, those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s. I find myself so appreciative in this moment.
Oh, Adam, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This journey, I really very quickly just will share one other thing. one of the stories why I decided to write the book is that I had an extraordinary experience of being told that Michael Jackson wanted to meet the real live Bambi at Disney. And that is something I will talk about on Thursday.
Oh my good, chills, chills. I might have
And
to.
it's in the book.
I might have to call in sick. All right. Bambi,
All right.
thank you so much for your time. Seth Wright
All right.
is coming up momentarily. Stay with us for that.
It's such a great question. And to bring it up, I have to mention one of my SoundTrax co-panelists. So there's this guy named Guy Whitmore who, in the world of music design for video games, is just an absolute legend. And Guy actually came and spoke whenever I was a graduate student at the Eastman School of Music. And I heard him speak, and I remember just the light flicking, and just it was, for me, it was that this is what I'm going to do with my life moment. And just as he's talking about how music expands our ability to tell engaging stories and to make, games that aren't just fun, but that are also art for our audience. He's sort of talking about this, and I'm like, yes, I need that. So the story goes that Guy actually gave me that first internship, that first chance to jump into the video game industry. And so now it's pretty full circle, because coming up at SoundTrax, we'll be sort of on the same panel, which is really an awesome moment. So from Eastman, I went over to Seattle, and I worked on some really cool projects. I worked on a Microsoft project called Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I got plugged into virtual reality. I got to work on a game called Iron Man VR, which was a lot of fun, just sort of like cutting my teeth against things. And from there, I jumped into freelance for a while. I went in-house at some audio houses for a while, and then pretty quickly, I decided I liked virtual reality, and I got plugged in at Meta, where I spent the last 3 or 4 years working in-house as a music systems director on Batman Arkham Shadow. And then just earlier this year, the time was right for us to go ahead and start our own company. So my wife and I founded Right Music Interactive, and we're working with all kinds of people right now. No, in fact, about as not from there as you can get in terms of like just tone and feel. I'm from Oklahoma, so Oklahoma born and raised. So you can imagine me. I'm very used to tornadoes. I'm very used to like planes and cows and things like that. So I moved up to Rochester and really quick discovered that the cold hits different up there. I owe so much to Rochester and to Eastman and to, faculty members that I know you've interviewed Mark Waters, the director of the Beale Institute at Eastman, where I graduated. And of course, Jeff and Joan Beale, who, we're honoring during the SoundTrax Festival for their momentous gift to the Eastman School of Music just recently, are just not just people that I know of, these incredible people who I sort of know intellectually, gave generously to make my education happen, but also like humans who I know, who have talked to me, who understood my artistic desires and like stepped into my own story to make it happen. So much of my musical root is from Rochester. Absolutely. Well, the glamorous answer is that, it's you and maybe a couple hundred of your best friends all working together on a project that you care about deeply for years at a time. The less glamorous answer is that I sit right here in my basement for, all day, every day, just sort of smashing my head against technical problems, trying to figure out why music won't work in certain ways. The thing that I love about video game music is, first of all, that it's a massively long-form creative art. When we're working on film, a lot of the time, composers will get brought in post-production. So the film has been made, and then a composer will go in and sort of score it to picture from there. In video games, composers are part of the team. We're in it. We're working alongside the developers as things are changed, and everybody else is having to adapt and overcome those obstacles. The composer is too, a lot of the time. I also love that video games are what we call nonlinear. So whereas in film music, or like we would listen to on our, headphones or something like that, music will have a beginning and a middle and an end, and you hit play and it sort of goes. With video game music, it's not like this at all. Music rewrites itself and adapts itself in real time based on what players are doing. And that specific thing right there that we call music design is what I fell in love with. And even more than composition, have built my company and my own future around. So much of it is, knowing what's planned, even though what we actually see in the experience while we're working on it might be just very, very broken, very, very in progress. You sort of become a mind reader because, you know, you're working with programmers and engineers and game developers and things like this, and I can fake it pretty well, but I am not those things. I am a creative artist, far less a technical artist. So you learn the ability to intuit what is going to happen in this experience rather than what you see now. And the other thing is, we're not just trying to tell in the moment stories, but video games oftentimes take dozens or sometimes even hundreds of hours to play through. So we're trying to tell an arc not just over a 2-hour movie, but over a video game that somebody might be playing, you know, an hour or two sessions for weeks or months of their lives. It depends. It depends on the composer. It depends on the direction that comes from top down. You know, increasingly more and more, the video games that we see winning Music of the Year awards and things like this have these short, truncated, bite-sized thematic elements that people can hear and that sort of trigger memory. But there are also great examples of games that don't play so much into these memorable themes. They're sort of like success stories on both sides of that, I guess. There's a game called Ori and the Ori and the Blind Forest, which is again it was an old indie game, so it was a small team. They were kind of like self-published at the time, and it was just a beautiful game, incredibly emotional. And you know, it's a silly game. It's about like this mouse thing that runs through the forest, right? I fell in love with the work, the composition work of this composer Gareth Coker, and just absolutely was floored by it. And I remember telling my wife, like calling her in from the next room and being like, "Listen to this music," and she's like, "Yeah, wow, this is really like stirring me emotionally as we're watching this, you know, like I said, cute mouse run across the screen." So a cool thing about that story is that whenever I started school at Eastman, Mark Waters first asked everybody in the class, "What are your, like, who do you listen to? What do you like?" And I gave that example. And then the cool thing is, the first project that I worked on whenever I graduated from the Eastman School of Music was the sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And of course, I wasn't on the music team at that time. I was doing audio and sound and things like that. But even getting to be like rubbing shoulders with it was so profound for me as a student. I think any person who is a craftsman gets tired every now and then. But the thing about approaching something not just as a passion, but also as a craft, is that I acknowledge that that tiredness, that fatigue comes and goes and ebbs and flows, and that my responsibility to making good art and being a good craftsman has to transcend that. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So Batman Arkham Shadow, what you're referring to, Arkham Shadow won VR Game of the Year from both DICE and also the Game Awards last year. It was huge and so incredible. I did not win it personally, but the entire team of about 97, 98 developers who all worked together and bled for the project sort of like earned it together and were able to celebrate it together. Every time Guy speaks, I learn something. He is a person who has the ability to just give wisdom in such a humble way where it doesn't feel like you're being just instructed from on high. It's just like, hey, this is the thing. This is the way that we can be better. Come along with me. He has that capacity. And anyone who comes out to SoundTrax and hears him speak on this panel, you will get this effect because it's just who he is as a person. Writing the music in some ways. So, for example, whenever I'm working with, you know, composer Kazuma Janucci on Batman Arkham Shadow, and I was able to write some music for the project as well, you know, the thing about VR is a lot of things can make players very sick. A lot of things that we can get away with easily in games that aren't VR, like camera cuts and shots and like moving from a first person perspective to another perspective. These are things we take for granted when we're watching TV. But when we're playing a virtual reality video game, that can very quickly make us sick. So what that means is that a lot of our scenes have to be scored very intricately so that whatever the player does, we can make that sound sort of intentional and noble and majestic without resorting to jump cuts that might throw players out of it. So it can be a little tricky, yeah. It is actually, yes. So, yeah, I mean, The Last of Us did that, of course, but there's so many other examples. I mean, Game of the Year, like Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West, these include songs. These are other major Sony titles. Um, God of War, which was another huge title. The credits sequence on that game is a song with Hosier. So there's tons of examples of things like that. And although they're not songs with words, Batman Arkham Shadow does incorporate some pre-recorded music elements from other artists in certain sequences. So yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is not necessarily just create the best like music score that we can. We're trying to create the best music experience that we can, which often means tapping other people's work. Music is collaborative. Everything we do about music is collaborative. We make it with other people, we listen to it with other people, we hear and experience it as a group. And the act of creating music for film and media is the same thing. We have to view it as a collaborative partner to the visual medium that we're working with. It's the same with games, it's the same with film. The best teams are those that work together to make great stories and, like I said, make great art that is music interleaving with all of the many, many other disciplines that are a part of any visual media. So, absolutely, yes. The hot button topic of artificial intelligence is it is something that we need to consider, but here's the thing. This has always been the case, that if you want to succeed in a creative enterprise, you need to become an expert at what you do, you need to master the craft, and you have to be a person who is willing to absorb and incorporate emerging technologies in that. This has always been the case. It just so happens that the emerging technology now that we get to incorporate and use as a tool happens to be things like artificial intelligence. It's so ironic because some of the things right now that that major AI online providers are worst at is actually math. So yeah, I'm a little surprised by that perhaps. The thing that surprises me is not that artificial intelligence is getting very good at some sort of visual art, as we say. The thing that's surprising me is the incredible stuff that creators are able to use with it as a tool. So, first of all of a sudden, my mom, who is, 65, and wants to put on a cool birthday party, can make a really cool graphic in 5 minutes that she feels good about and can show her friends. That's not threatening. Like, nobody's losing their job. She wasn't going to go and pay for that. It's just a way that people can experience and create something cool together. So I find it empowering, to be honest. I'm a bit of a tech optimist. The panel is going to be really, really fascinating for so many reasons. First of all, you don't need to have any sort of huge musical experience, but if you do, we're gonna go deep on some of those things too. You're gonna hear some of my music. You're gonna hear some of the work from Guy, who I've already spoke on. Gary Scheinman is there. He's a composition legend, someone who I've admired for years, on all of the great work that he's done. He's also worked extensively in VR. He's very involved in California in education. The combined wisdom and personalities in the room, I think, is going to yield something that's really approachable to everybody who wants to come out. It's not going to be just a pompous, arrogant group of people sitting there and sort of showing off their achievements to everybody. We all just really care about what we're doing. And I think it's going to be a delight, both for those who can experience it and also, frankly, for me sitting there and learning from some other great panelists. Absolutely. It's been a joy. I can't wait for the conference. Hope people come out and see all the great stuff that's going to be there.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.